Hello, it's Dale here, and welcome to Beginner Resin 101 Essential Supplies. Today we're going to touch on some of the supplies that you need for resining, some of the stuff that I like to use. I'll make sure that I put stuff in the comments. Again, I'm at the old mill here in my studio. It's about 100 years old. And there's about 350 artists here. So if you hear banging or sanding or anything going on, that's because it's a big community here that produces a whole lot of art right in the city, in the heart of the city, Lowell. So I do apologize for some of that background noise, but this is a really awesome place for us. But with that, we're going to go right into more of the supplies that you're going to need and a way for you to kind of start researching and looking at supplies that are readily available to you and economical and something that you can reuse so it's recycled or sustainable. So we already touched on some of the essential tools and even a few of the supplies. Again, we're going to get a little bit more into that. We talked about epoxy. This is the epoxy that I will typically use, which is Total Boat. It's a tabletop epoxy. One of the things you want to really consider when you're getting an epoxy is something called a pot life. The pot life is actually your working time. Most epoxy comes in two parts. You have the resin, and then you also have a hardener, and you mix the two together. And when you mix them together, they create a chemical reaction, and then will turn very hard. The pot life is how much time you have to work with this, and before it really starts reacting and then turning hard, and then you can't really do anything with it. The tabletop, the one that I use a lot, only has a 30-minute pot time. I do a lot of small projects. And I do that on purpose so that I can use a small amount and I can make sure that I'm within that 30 minutes. One example, I just made these with my laser and some resin, and as you can see, it's a really small amount of resin, and I was able to do something like 20 of these in a half hour. And so that's just something that I'm looking for, some of those smaller projects. The more you start working the resin, the more you get comfortable with it and how long that you have. I highly suggest have a notebook handy and just start writing everything down. It's what I did when I first started projects. But we'll get more into resin a little bit later. But tabletop from Total Boat is one that I use. So just look around your area to see what else there might be. Another supply that you're going to want is some type of a wood sealer if you're using wood. I like to use shellac. That's readily available here in the United States. It dries pretty quickly, although I like to give it at least 24 hours before I do anything with the wood after I've sealed it with shellac. You might not have this in your area. You might have to look around to see what else you have for a sealer. You also are going to then need some type of a colorant. Of course, you can keep it clear, and if you're going to look for resin, look for one that is a clear resin once it dries. But a lot of times you're going to want those cool effects, and with those cool effects, you're going to want colors. There's a lot of different things that you can use to add to your resin for coloring. It could be as simple as just acrylic paint. It doesn't even have to be a very expensive paint. I've gotten some really great results just by going to Ocean State Job Lot and grabbing some of their craft paint that they have there. That's going to give you a solid colored resin that doesn't have a whole lot of effects in it. which could be perfectly fine for whatever you might be doing. You can also use different types of alcohol inks. The ones that I use the most is this Dollar Rani FW. I will also use Liquitex. There's a lot of different things that you can do with these. You can look for metallic, that's what this is. You can look for something called a Pearl X. And I don't know if you could see just the colors on this is just really super cool. And this will also give a different effect, almost like a color changing effect to your resin. I will use Mermaid Trash a lot. They have some really cool colors. They're very specific for resins. This is a small company here in the United States, so I really like to use this one as well. So these are all alcohol inks. Make sure when you're using these, you really shake them up very well before you use them. Another thing that you're going to want to use is, or you might want to play with, is mica powders. Mica powders is a fine crush powder. They use it in all different kinds of things, from cosmetics to candle making and soap making, and it's great for resin too. And there's a lot of different products out there. Again, one of my favorites is Mermaid Trash, as well as Eye Candy. These are the two brands that I use the most, but there are a lot of other ones out there. And it really depends on what you're going for techniques and looks and all kinds of styles. This one happens to be a glow-in-the-dark, so that's super, super cool. Again, it's just a fine powder. And you mix that into your resin, and it gives the different effects. So this is like I said, this is a glow-in-the-dark one. This is a color changing one, so I don't know if you can see the pigments in there, but that's pretty neat. Very sparkly, which again may or may not be what you're going for, but it's pretty cool. When I buy these, a lot of times they come into a plastic bag. I've gotten these containers. I like the containers better than the plastic bag, and then I just take the stickers and put it on here. Artisan has a lot of good ones as well. And so this is a gold. A lot of times they'll actually mix mica powder with acrylic inks, and that also gives a different effect. Black Diamond, another product, has some really nice colors in it. So it's you're going to be looking around. Again, what's affordable. A lot of these come in some really small sizes, so if you're just starting out, just get one or two of these different colors that you might want to play with. Boy, one thing I really like about the eye candy is a lot of times they have multi-shades and multi-colors. So as you're moving around, it has a different color effect to it, and it's super cool. This rusty color is really nice. And then Unicorn Art is another really nice mixture. Loving those colors in there. In later videos, we'll talk about mixing, your ratios, and a lot of it is just experimenting to see exactly what you want. Although I think the rule of thumb is you want to make sure that you put less than 10% of colorant versus your resin. which if you're putting that much in, that is a lot of color. I've found you really don't need to put too much color in to get really nice effects. So you have your colors that you can add, you have your resin. Those are the big things that you need. If you're going to be doing ocean pours and you want those really cool white cells that look like crashing waves, this is a really good product here. Cast and Crafts, the white pigment. This is just drops, and again, I do really small batches. So in my batches, I really only use about 3, maybe 4 drops of these. But at the same time, I'll actually add a second product from Mermaid Trash, either lace white or foam white. And this is a paste. So you have the liquid, which would be a drop, and then this is a type of paste. So you mix up your resin, you're going to put these in, and you mix them up really well, and then you're good to go. So we talked also about if you're mixing, there's 2 different ways to mix your resins. I'm going to turn this a little bit. You can get specific cups that will tell you mixtures. So I use a 1-to-1 mixture of resin versus hardener. So if you're going to do that, you go 1, you pour 1 here, which would be your resin, and then you're going to pour the hardener up to this one, and that's a 1-to-1 ratio. Or you could do a 2-to-1 ratio, and so forth and so on. And this would be per volume, which if you look at a lot of the resins, it's going to tell you 1-to-1 mix ratio. That is per volume. So this is volume. I prefer to actually weigh things out. You can use the same type of plastic cup. I like to use silicone. Resin does not stick to silicone, so once it has dried, you can just peel it right off. You just flip inside out, and then you can clean them really well. They do have a measurement on it, but I don't use that. I actually do the grams. So I have a food, just a simple, cheap food scale, and I do it by the grams. Most of my projects, again, because I want to do it within that 30 minutes, most of my projects, I can mix all the resin I need in this cup. This is a 250 milliliter ml cup, so I can do most of that in there. For Total Boat, I can tell you that when you're doing it for the grams, it's 10 grams of resin to 8.4 grams of hardener. And I've created a sheet which has really helped me. And this tells me, depending on what project I'm working on, how much to mix. So I don't have to do the calculations each time. I have this little cheat sheet here that really helps me, so that it's pretty much foolproof. You can see I have another section over here for the 3-to-1. This 3-to-1 is if you're doing a thick set, so you're doing the resin tables, river tables and stuff like that. So that's a different product. But for the tabletop and for 1-to-1, this is what I use. But if you're not using Total Boat, you need to you call or contact the manufacturer and ask them what the formula is if you're going to be weighing it out in grams instead of using volume. That is very important. Resins are not all the same. They are different. So I have, again, 3 different size silicone cups, and I have a whole bunch of them, and I use these, and I use them all the time, and it might be a little bit of an investment. They're really actually fairly cheap. I got them on Amazon. I'm sure there's a lot of other places to get them, but because I get the free shipping, I get a lot of things on Amazon. So these are the 3 silicone cups that I use. Then you're going to want something for mixing. A lot of people will use wooden stir sticks, which is perfectly fine too, but then you're just going to have to throw those away. So again, I really don't want to be throwing things away, so I try to find more silicone type stuff. So I'm going to move this over here. So this is just a wooden stir stick from Let's Resin that is coated in silicone, and fits pretty perfect in here, as you can see. I actually like these ones a little bit better. I like that they have a little bit more. I can put my whole hand on it instead of just using my fingers. You will have to stir for anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the resin that you're using. And the nice thing is, if you're using these bigger cups, they fit in the bigger cups too. So these are a real nice one. Those are different stir sticks. Then you're going to need something to spread the resin. You'll pour it, obviously, on your product or project that you're doing, but then you're going to want to spread it out. And I like to use, you could actually use these. I like to use this. This is like a silicone brush. Sometimes to be fun and mix things up, I do a lot of ocean pours. I just found these hard plastic drink stirrers, and this works really good too. Very easy. The hard plastic, it's really easy to clean off with denatured alcohol and a rag. And those make fun videos. I know a lot of people have used the little hands. Those are actually adorable if you're doing a lot of social media and you want to get that little cute laugh. I also love these brushes. This is also silicone, and it comes in a variety of shapes and sizes. And this is, I do a little bit of detail work, and especially if you're using small things. So this works really great. And then I just have this also. I think this all came as a pack when I bought a pack of these, or maybe I bought a pack of these. This is also hard plastic, and I just simply use that to kind of measure out my mica powder. No big deal. But with the hard plastic, it's really super easy to clean off and go for the next time. So think about sustainability. One thing I forgot to mention in the last video for tools is get yourself a level. This is a cheap level. You could get something a little bit better, but it is very important for many projects, not all of them, but many projects, you want it to be level because resin is self-leveling. And that means if your project is flat, but it's not level, and your resin will start to run off, and then you can lose a lot of resin that way. Or if you've done your ocean pour and you didn't notice that it's not level, and then you come back and all that white has now just gone right off onto your table. And speaking of going off onto the table, again, protect your table. I have these really extra large silicone mats, which I can use again and again and again. There are other things that you can use here at the studio. We have, like I said, a lot of artists, and one in particular does vinyl signs, and he actually gives me the backing to that's the vinyl's on, and it's just a plastic, and he'd just be throwing away. So I use this, and nothing sticks to this. So again, once your resin dries, it just peels right off of this, really easy. And yep, I'm gonna eventually throw away, but I'm reusing something that would eventually go in there anyway. Something else, and you don't even need to buy anything, is a riser. Risers are going to be very important when you're doing a project. It keeps your project up off the surface, because you're going to have runoff. And the resin is going to go underneath, it's going to create drips, and then that it's just going to really make a mess. So I drink a lot of iced coffee, and I found that these are just absolutely perfect for risers. This is just the cap to the iced coffee. You can use caps to pretty much anything. A hard plastic is what you're going to be looking for, because that resin doesn't really stick, or it just pops right off real easy. And you're keeping plastic out of the environment, so that's awesome. Here is a project that I'll be showing and demonstrating with you guys later, as it's just going to be an inlay. So what I did is I taped off, so this is another supply, it's just cheap painter's tape, and I taped the back off, because I'm going to eventually do an ocean pour, and when I do a pour on this, it's going to drip over the edge, and then eventually it's going to go under here. You're going to have drips here. The tape makes it easier to peel off, and then it doesn't stand on the back. But these are the risers I'm talking about. So I just put a little bit of tape on it and just pop it on. And you put it on your table, and as you can see, it's off the table by a couple of inches, and when the resin drips under, it's not going to ruin it, really stick to your project. So don't have to put any money into that, just recycle things that you're already using to use for risers. So that's pretty much it for essential supplies. I'm going to move over and just show you some of how I have my setup here. I've got lots of different colors for micas, and I got my pastes, and then I have all my inks. Another good thing to have on hand is isophoric alcohol. The higher the percentage, the better. And I will put that in a spray bottle. And one thing that does is that will also help pop some bubbles if you do a mist on it. But if you're doing an ocean pour, you'll get some really cool foam-like effects. I'm going to kind of move over. I save all my drippings. These are all drippings, and I can use those in other projects. So they're all perfectly dry, but they're pretty cool. So those are the ocean pours with some of those cells. Look for all different types of projects. I collected seashells, and I just put a little translucent resin in there, and a little charm. Simple, but you're using up some extra resin that you might have. I said before that I save all the resin that turns hard. I just peel it off, as you can see. That was a big table pour, so I had a lot of extra, and it just poured onto the table. Then I used my laser to do some fretwork, and then I just glued it together, and then put a clear pour on it, and that is that can hang in a window. We'll also get into some molds. So I have a mold, again, when I have extra resin that I'm not using, I pour into the mold, and usually it's about 5 or 6 projects. And you just keep pouring them on top of each other. You see different colors in there. That's each color is a different project. So instead of wasting your resin, you put it into here, and then you can get even more money back from your resin. There's so many different things that you can do with this. Color combinations. You do clear. You can put stuff in it. That's sand, shark's teeth, shells. You can do some painting. So I have a teacup here, and I've painted a turtle in it. There's sand in there. So lots of different stuff. I do a lot with the laser for inlays and projects. And then I add my resin. It's one of my favorites. But that's it. And next time we'll talk about resin and mixing, and then after that we'll just get right into a project.